Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading, and thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. This is a bonus episode. And what I want to talk about is respect. More specifically, I'm going to give you a little game that I got from one of the homies. Shout out to the homie, Uncle Dolomite from the Too Much Game podcast. That's my boy, Compton's own, the wealthy billionaire, Uncle Dolomite. But I was listening to his podcast one day, and he said something that stuck with me a lot of times. And Dolomite's podcast is interesting because it's called the Too Much Game podcast. And if you listen close enough, there's a lot of game that he gives you in the podcast. And it's not game as far as like running game on women, but just game for life. And one thing he said one day, and this was months ago, I just wrote the notes down and I knew I'd come back to, deliver this in a podcast form. But he said, I always lead with respect. And I think that was so key because I feel the same way. You lead with respect. Some of us, particularly if you're of a certain age, some of us, respect goes a long way. And we give respect, but we also demand respect in the same breath, because I'm not going to demand something of you that I'm not going to give you in, first and foremost. You carry yourself with a certain level of respect for yourself, and then you demand that others give you that respect as well. And so he talked about leading with respect. And I think that's very key because, respect is big these days. And for someone like me, respect is big all my life. I tell people all the time, particularly when I'm just talking, let's just say I'm talking about work. I don't need a lot from my employer. What I need is my check and my respect. That's it. I don't need the awards. I don't need the accolades. I just need to make sure that direct deposit's hitting every 2 weeks. And I need the respect as a person, as a black man, as a human being. Outside of that, I don't care about anything else. I don't go to work to be friends with people. Now, in working, the years that I've worked, I have made some friends, more colleagues than friends, but I always carry myself with a level of respect. And that's not just at work, that's at play, that's wherever. One of the things that I made sure that I pointed out to my sons, particularly as they were growing, I said, watch me. If you see me walk into a room, sometimes you'll see people looking at me, and I'm not saying this arrogantly, but people will look at me as if I am someone important. Now I'm not that much more important than anybody else, but it's the way that I walk, and it's the way that I carry myself. I carry myself and walk as if I own the room, even though I don't, even though I probably don't care to speak to anybody in the room. But it's a certain level of confidence. It's a certain level of belief in myself. It's a certain level of purpose that I walk with. And when people see that, they say to themselves, oh, he's somebody, or he's been here before, or he knows something. And so I've often said and wondered openly on this podcast, why do people talk to me sometimes like strangers? They'll just come up and just start talking. And it's because they see something in me, and that's just that's the way that I was raised. Like you walk in with a level of confidence, but you walk with respect, and you make sure that you have respect for yourself, but you also make sure that others respect you as well. Shout out to the late great Nipsey Hussle, rest in peace. Nipsey is such a fascinating person. A fascinating rapper, a fascinating person, a fascinating entrepreneur. And I'm going to do more episodes about his music on the sister station, the Rap Soul podcast. Shameless plug. But Nipsey's one of the few people that when I click on a link of him talking on YouTube, you can literally go down a rabbit hole, because like so much of what he said in his lifetime, and he wasn't here, relatively speaking, he wasn't here that long. As many of you know, Nipsey was tragically murdered in 2019, I think. But Nipsey was the type of person that when he said something, like his words resonate, and they resonated to the point where there's just an algorithm of YouTube videos where that'll keep popping up. If you had, I mean, I haven't seen all of his interviews, but I tell you what, if I start watching one interview, you'll want to watch another, because he's not saying, unlike some rappers, he's not saying the same things. Like, he's very deliberate and intentional in what he's saying. And I speak sometimes, and when I talk about him, I speak about Nipsey as if he's still here. So forgive me if I'm speaking him in existence, but he speaks to the point where you think that he's still here, even though he isn't. But one of the things I remember seeing in a video, it was a short on YouTube, and he just talked about respect. He was like, you're going to respect me. He was like, I'll die for my respect. And, to the average person, that sounds a lot extreme, but to him, he meant it. And it's not extreme at all, because, at the end of the day, he's a man. He was a black man who stood on that. And that had nothing to do with, how or why he's no longer with us. But the point that he was making was that's a level of importance to him. And there's something that Uncle Dolomite referred to on the podcast. As far as respect, you lead with respect. And the reason why I came to this topic was because if you look around, if you check out social media, if you turn on the TV, you see a lot of disrespect. And, it's one thing if you don't respect yourself. If you don't respect yourself, okay, cool. I can't make you respect you. But I will never allow you to disrespect me. If you don't have any self-respect, that's cool. But you won't disrespect me in the process. And a lot of this stuff, what I'm talking about, came to head this past week. If you've been following current events, and I don't talk about current events, but we all saw what happened between ESPN personality Stephen A. Smith and the great LeBron James from the LA Lakers. If you're not familiar what happened, Stephen A. Smith had said some things on air and possibly off air about LeBron's son, Bronny James, or AKA LeBron James Jr., about him playing with the Lakers and playing alongside his father. Of course, his father's had a storied, 23-year career, arguably the greatest basketball player to ever play. We're not discussing that here, but, Stephen A. Smith had some things to say, and LeBron took issue with it, and LeBron approached Stephen A. Smith, not in the hallway, not, in an interview room, not at ESPN, but as Stephen A. Smith was sitting courtside to one of LeBron's Laker games just a few days ago. And it became, the topic of discussion in just about every place that you could go. It was all on TV and the water cooler. And LeBron just walked up to Stephen A. Smith, who was, again, sitting near the Lakers bench. And he said, basically, leave my son out of this. He cussed at him. But, Stephen A. was probably taken aback by it, as anybody would, because he didn't anticipate LeBron approaching him there. But, there's a couple of layers here that I don't think people got into. And that's not what this episode is about, but I'm going to bring it back to the respect factor. Stephen A. Smith is someone who's older than LeBron, but Stephen A. Smith is from the old school where media, there was a point in time where, if you covered a team, you may or may not have to write something bad about the team or the players on the team. And the great thing about the pre-internet era was if you said something in the paper, if you wrote a story about somebody in the paper, you were going to have to see them the next time that there was a game. And that was in any sport, baseball, football, basketball, it didn't matter, right? Hockey, it didn't matter. You was going to see them in the locker room. And that athlete may have an issue with what you said. And if that were the case, then you were going to have to, chop it up with them in person, face to face. You weren't hiding behind a camera. You weren't hiding in your room. You weren't hiding behind a cell phone. And I think that was a beautiful time because, you basically had to literally and figuratively stand on whatever business you were talking about. And it was about respect. And whatever you reported, you had to answer for it, right? You couldn't say something like I literally could, I have, for those of you watching on YouTube, I have my cell phone here. I literally could type a text to anyone, wherever in the United States or across the world. And I could cuss them out. And in doing that, I could then set off a chain of a back and forth. But it's one thing to say something to someone via a phone or social media. It's another thing to be face to face and say it to someone's face. That's respect. And it doesn't have to necessarily be confrontational. It doesn't have to, result in fisticuffs, even though sometimes it can. It doesn't have to result in gunplay because I'm not trying to unlife you, but what I do want to do is get my point across and let you know that, your disrespect will not be tolerated. And I see this every day because if you're on social media, you can see in full time, what as the kids call it, live in 4K. You can see it in real time, just the disrespect. I mean, like, social media is a place, it's not a real place first and foremost, but I've seen, let's say LeBron. LeBron may put up a tweet, happy Sunday, I'm chilling with my daughter, we're just enjoying this day, and it is great to be a Laker. And there's probably going to be a million comments. Oh, you guys look so cute together. She's growing up so big. Beautiful, positive comments. But then there's going to be about 50 different comments. Oh man, you're terrible. Why did you miss that shot last night? You had a chance to win the game, but you blew it. You're not clutch. You're not the GOAT. And it's like, and I'm sure LeBron does not read any of that stuff. He probably reads some, but most of the stuff doesn't get to him. But even in saying that, why would you even say that type of stuff? Because you know that you can be disrespectful behind your keyboard and have keyboard courage, and he's never going to respond. And if he does respond, some people get elated and happy the fact that he responded. Or there's some who get offended because that celebrity or that athlete, said something to him. Like, I remember distinctly this young lady who I used to follow on Twitter. She was a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan. And she would, big up Dallas Cowboys all the time. And she just, she was, I'm not going to say she was obsessive with it, but she would, say things, and she would at certain players or whatever, some of her favorite players, nothing malicious, never anything malicious. But, one day their star receiver at the time, this guy named Dez Bryant, had done something. I can't remember what Dez did, but he did something. He'd run a foul or something and said something wrong. And she jumped on Twitter and Dez, she at messaged Dez several times. I'd seen it before, what have you. And Dez never responds because he never responds to fans. And this one day where she tells him, like, Dez, this is unbecoming of you. You need to chill out. You need to do better. You're better than that. She was trying to be positive, but, she still was coming at him. And Dez, who had never responded to her or any other fan, replied to her and told her to shut the fuck up. Listen, I laughed so hard because, like, even though it was disrespectful for him to say that, people forget that these celebrities, these athletes, these people that some of you idolize, they're people too. They have good days, they have bad days, and then they have some days where they're not going to take your shit. And I always said this about social media. Like I don't log on to social media for you to berate me. This is my platform. This is now if you want to have a critical fair point about what you think about the podcast, that's cool. It's the podcast, this podcast and the Rap Soul podcast are out here for public consumption. If you don't like it, there's a off button. But what you won't do is you won't get disrespectful in the comment section. Because if you say something, I'm going to say something back just because I don't believe in going back and forth. And then I can tell just from looking at some people, you never got punched in the mouth before. And if we're being honest, some of you, with some of the stuff that you say online, hiding behind computers and phones, should be punched in the mouth. And I'm not advocating violence, but some of you should be punched in the mouth. It's like, the homie Uncle Dolomite said, like, some of y'all don't know how your blood tastes, because you've never tasted your own blood before, meaning that somebody didn't bust your shit up. And so, like, you have to get to that point where you can't be cool with the disrespect. And when you're cool with the disrespect, then, how far are you going to take it? And most people are not going to take any disrespect. So, I said all that to say this, especially as far as LeBron and his situation. Stephen A. Smith, in his mind, was being critical of LeBron and how he's handled the parent part of, bringing his son into the NBA. And Stephen A. Smith has his points. I can't necessarily say that he's wrong. And LeBron's son, Bronny James, is open to criticism because he's a pro. You're not a high school kid. You're not a college kid anymore. So the gloves are off. So if you have a game that you stink in, yeah, people are going to talk about it. I mean, it is what it is. But on the other side, I understand where LeBron is coming from because, that's his son. And I don't know, and lost in all of this, we don't know what LeBron heard. I mean, I know what I heard, or at least what we thought we heard on TV and what Stephen A. Smith has said on his podcast. And everything seemed to at least based on what I've saw and what I've heard, and I don't watch Stephen A. Smith or listen to him, but what I gathered, everything seemed to be above board. It didn't seem to be anything personal. But you never know, because Stephen A. Smith is the type that he'll throw little jabs in there. He'll say, oh yeah, LeBron James is an incredible player. He's the greatest player. He's the second best player ever. You don't need to say that. That right there is a poke at LeBron and his fans and whomever. Wherever you think LeBron ranks, that's fine. I'm not here to debate that. But what I will say is that, LeBron felt like he was disrespected. And you cannot blame a man who feels like he's disrespected for approaching you. And I saw a lot of commentary. Well, LeBron could have pulled Stephen A. to the side. No, they're in a game. Like, if you think about it, he kind of picked the perfect place to do it because he was able to say what he needed to say, get it off. It was a surprise, and then he was able to go back to work. And would I've liked to have seen it play, behind closed doors? Sure, that would have been great. But sometimes it's not like that. And if you feel like you've been disrespected, I can't tell you how or where you should react. Sometimes you just react. Right now, it's time for a quick commercial break. On the other side, we'll talk a little bit more about leading with respect. Sit tight. I'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener, or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before, from nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between. The 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle podcast. And we're talking about leading with respect. I mentioned before the break that, respect for most men is paramount. Like, you cannot disrespect me. And being disrespectful, disrespect comes in a lot of different forms. And the thing is that most men, and I want to push the ladies out of this conversation for just a second. Most men know when they're being disrespectful to another man. And so disrespect is never tolerated. It's never tolerated. I'm always, as Uncle Dolomite said, and I concur, I'm always going to lead with respect, because here's the thing. When you don't lead with respect, you are only giving another man the opportunity to either be confused about what it is that you're doing or your motives, or that you're being disrespectful. And I'm not going to be disrespectful to any other man unless he's disrespectful to me or mine. I'm not going to disrespect anybody, but I won't tolerate the disrespect. That's not going to happen. And I think no matter how big you are, no matter how tall you are, no matter how much you weigh, no matter how much money's in your bank account, every man has a pushing point. And if you push that man to that point, you never know what's going to happen when he goes across that line. Because again, if you disrespect somebody, I'm from the old school. You disrespect somebody, that could cause you to get punched in the face. And I'm positive that, a lot of the disrespect that I see online, is done because, there's a generation of people generation of men particularly, who've never been punched in the face before. And trust me, if you've been punched in the face before, if you've tasted your own blood, it ain't a good thing. And you will be far more less likely to disrespect again. I remember distinctly some years ago, was it probably about, 17, 18 years ago, I had this sales job, right? And in the sales job, part of the job was we were doing like door-to-door sales. And so you're out talking to people, what have you. And then sometimes like the company would set up the appointments or what have you, if you weren't able to, speak to the homeowner or whatever like that. But one of the things that I learned very quickly about sales was, it's important that you talk to the decision maker in the house. If there's a man and a woman in the house, you need to talk to the decision maker. If there's a woman and a woman or a man and a man, you still need to talk to both, but you got to try to win over the decision maker. Now, sales is, at least back then, it was very antiquated because we were taught to, get to the man first. But, in a lot of times, in a lot of situations, you can have a husband and wife, and the wife is the decision maker. The husband may make the money, but the wife makes the decisions. And so at this particular time, I was working for this company. We were selling security systems, right? And so, you're selling the fact of the security system, the safety of it. And, the woman doesn't want to be, you paint the picture in your sales pitch of the husband being away and the woman being at home alone throughout the day. And, particularly, and if somebody had some break-ins in their area, you could play on that. But one of the things that I tried to make sure, at least what I was taught, when you go to someone's house, and like, let's say that the appointment is set and you're meeting John and Jane Smith. So they both come to the door, or let's say John comes to the door. Now, you haven't talked to John Smith. You've been talking to Jane all this time. Now, you don't know these people from anybody. The thing that you want to do is, particularly if John is greeting you at the door, you want to greet him with a firm handshake. If, let's just say, they were out in the yard and you just walked up on him and you didn't have an appointment, you want to greet him first. And the reason why is, at least what we were taught, is because, one, it's a level of respect. I can't speak to your wife before I speak to you. I need to speak to you first. And what I need to do is to make sure that you understand, in this handshake, even if we've been talking on the phone, if I've been talking on the phone with your wife setting the appointment, or if I just walked into your front yard, I'm not a threat to you. I'm not a threat to you. I don't want your woman. I don't care how fine she is. I don't want your woman. I want this business interaction to be just business. And I want to be able to sell directly to you. And then subsequently, if your wife is the decision maker, I need to be able to get to her as well. Simply put. So you could, and it's funny because, like, I got so good at it where you could see men's defenses breaking down. I mean, I ain't a big guy. I might be a suave guy, but I ain't a big guy. And so, I don't know what these men would think, but if someone had been talking to my wife and she said, "Oh yeah, this guy Kyle, he's coming by tonight at 7:30. We have an appointment. We're gonna he's gonna talk about the security system," and she's been talking to me on the phone, and he hadn't talked to me. He naturally his defenses are going to be up because he doesn't know me. All he knows that I'm coming to his house to sell a security system. That's it. And I said all that to say this. I'm leading with respect. My respect is extended in that handshake to the husband as soon before I even come in the door. And I've even moved that into my personal life, wherein if there was a situation where, like, let's say, I don't know, an old college friend from South Carolina State University, and let's just say that my old college friend, is introducing me to her husband. And her husband didn't attend South Carolina State as I did with his wife, now wife. I'm going to go a little bit above and beyond with the, greeting and how you doing, where'd you guys meet? I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to bring the defenses down because I don't know, God, we're kind of crazy like this, but guys, I don't want him thinking like, "Yo, was you with this dude when y'all was in college?" And I don't want to get in people's personal business, but I don't know how, particularly if I've never met this guy, I want to make sure that I bring his defenses down in the most coolest and calm manner. And I want him to leave the interaction with me thinking, "Okay, man, that dude was pretty cool. I see why y'all were friends in college." I don't want him to think like I smashed this old lady back in the day. Even though that's another story for another day. But anyway, I didn't. But but it is different for me because my wife and I went to school together. So, I understand how men can be sensitive to that type of stuff. But I want to make sure that I bring his defenses down. Again, that's leading with respect. If a man feels like, we have testosterone. I mean, like, we don't talk about it a lot, but we have testosterone. And, a lot of times, it's particularly even some of the things that you see, not just online, but even on TV, it becomes a pissing contest between men. You can see that. I mean, you can see that with even as something as simple as some of these quote unquote world leaders. And I'm not going to name any names, but yeah, I mean, it's a flex. It's like, okay, well, we got money. Oh, well, we got money. Oh, well, we're bad. Oh, we bad too. You ain't bad. To quote the great Michael Jackson, you ain't bad. You ain't nothing. But seriously, it's about respect and the lack thereof. And I think there's an understanding that I want to have to take place. All in all, overall, in conclusion, you're entitled to your opinion. We don't have to have the same opinion. I could say Michael Jordan's the greatest. You could say LeBron's the greatest. I could say Prince is the greatest. You could say Michael Jackson's the greatest. I could say Run DMC's the greatest rap group of all time. You could say it's the Migos. Opinions are like buttholes. We all got them, right? However, what's important is the disrespect. or the lack thereof. You're entitled to your opinion. What you're not entitled to is disrespect. And I think the sooner and the quicker that people realize this, the less problems we'll have, because a lot of times stuff happens just from disrespect. And I can't speak to the disrespect between women, from woman to woman, because I'm not a woman. I see some of it, I see women openly flirting with other women's men and stuff like that. But I mean, that ain't none of my business. So I stick to the Black-owned business that's mine, and that's it. So like, I don't really travel in those circles to where I really would have to be worrying about what somebody else has done. I only worry about me and mine. But, like Uncle Dolomite said, I'm going to lead with respect. I'm always going to lead with respect. I'm always going to show love and show respect. I don't even necessarily have to like you to lead with respect. But even if I don't like you, we can still be cool and cordial. We don't have to be buddy. We don't have to be friends. Because sometimes we're going to encounter people that we don't like. And, as long as it's respectful, it's cool. I don't need you to speak to me. I don't have to speak to you. But respect, we cannot and will not tolerate disrespect. That's the biggest thing. And I think as we move on in life, that idea or that ideology gets bigger and bigger, because no, I'm not going to go fight somebody because of the disrespect. But, I might say something. And if I really totally feel disrespected, yeah, it might be on. But, most times cooler heads can prevail. I mean, again, if you ain't messing with my family, you ain't messing with my wife, you ain't messing with my money, I could pretty much walk away from any other type of confrontation or level of disrespect. But there's levels to it. Now, if you say something goofy to me online, I don't care nothing about that. I remember the first time somebody said something that I thought was disrespectful in the comment section on YouTube. This was years ago. It was my first time on Dead End Hip Hop with the homies. And shout out to Dead End Hip Hop, man. Cat's been rocking for 15 years now. But I remember the first time I did a guest spot on there, and somebody said something in the comments, and the fellas had not warned me, like, man, you got to take the comments with a grain of salt. And I also forgot, like, this generation, for some people, that's a lot of what they do. Like, they will just get on. I mean, like, they click the link and they watch the video. Or maybe they don't watch the video. And I had an issue. Well, I'm not gonna say I had an issue, but I had somebody say something kind of sideways on TikTok when I first opened up my TikTok account for this podcast. They didn't even understand or realize that the 30-second clip that I put up was a clip from a podcast. It wasn't just me just randomly talking. And I understand that a lot of people's TikTok content isn't like that. Their TikTok content is based on whatever they're doing or what have you, or in its opinion, and so it's a quick hit. They see it, they comment, and they go. And dude said something slick, and I responded back like with quick. I mean, like, I was quick. I said something quick, real slick back to him within a matter of 2 minutes. And it was just to let you know, homie, I don't know you. And this clip that you just saw is from a podcast. You can watch the podcast or you could not watch it. You don't even have to comment on this video. You can keep it pushing. But what we won't do, you're not going to talk reckless to me on my page. No, you can go talk. If you want to go over on Twitter and talk about my TikTok page and talk shit, fine. Be my guest, because I don't follow you, so I have no way of knowing what you said about me. But the disrespect in front of me, nah, player, we ain't doing that. We're not doing that at all. That's not the game that we play here. And so, in conclusion, disrespect and respect go a long way. I just think, like Uncle Dolomite said, you got to lead with respect, because if you don't lead with respect, it's going to be a problem. And depending on who you are and where you are, those problems could result into, confrontation. And you don't want that. Just respect yourself and respect others, and you'll be okay. Or at least you should be. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle with another edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I want to thank you all for tuning in as you do each and every week. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday and every Sunday. We have bonus episodes just like this one that we drop on Sundays. We're on social media at 12 Kyle, at 12 Kyle podcast across all social media platforms, as well as TikTok. If you'd like to support us financially, hit us up on Cash App, $ TWELVEKYLE. Also, we have merch. Look in the description box. There's a link that says merch. Click that link. You can buy 12 Kyle Podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. And last but not least, we have a new baby. It is called the Rap Soul Podcast. It is the place where there's an intersection of discussion about artists and music from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s when it comes to rap, soul music, hip hop, and R&B. It is the best music podcast that you've never heard, so make sure that you check it out. You can find that podcast wherever you found this podcast. We're on YouTube as well, Rap Soul Podcast, just like this podcast. The 12 Kyle Podcast is on YouTube as well. Again, I want to thank you all for tuning in. I want to a shout out and appreciation to the homie Uncle Dolomite for the topic. He didn't know he gave it to me, but he gave it to me anyway. Again, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Chill.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle Podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle Podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.